The Royal Guard fell asleep before the plane even left the gate. Eyes closed in seat 12, like nothing could touch him. Passengers stared at the Navy SEALs a few rows ahead. It was comedy. "The guy thinks he's on parade," they muttered. But halfway over the Atlantic, the sky changed. A violent jolt. Oxygen masks dropped. Smoke curled from the ceiling, and the pilot collapsed at the controls. Panic swept through the cabin. The SEALs looked at each other, but none of them moved. Then the cockpit door burst open. "I need a pilot now," the captain shouted. And that's when the man in red opened his eyes. Now, before we show you what happened when that Royal Guard walked into the cockpit, make sure you're subscribed and drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. Now, let's get into it. The gate at JFK had that familiar airport buzz. Travelers shuffling forward, boarding passes getting scanned, overhead announcements nobody really listens to. Just another transatlantic red-eye to London. Flight 209. Nothing special until he walked down the jet bridge. You know how sometimes a person just commands attention without trying? That was Corporal Thomas Ward, 6 feet of Coldstream Guard in full ceremonial dress, and there was literally nowhere to hide on a commercial airliner. Scarlet tunic that looked like it had been pressed with a steam iron and a prayer. Black trousers with a crease sharp enough to cut paper. Boots so polished they could double as mirrors. He carried a military garment bag over one shoulder, and under his arm was this tall oval case that screamed bear skin hat. The kind of thing that makes American tourists whip out their phones, because let's face it, you don't see that every day at 30,000 feet. Walking down that aisle, Ward had perfect posture, not the stiff show-off kind, just solid, like he'd been born standing at attention. A few passengers nodded respectfully. Others stared, but one group wasn't impressed at all. Rows 9 through 11 belonged to 6 Americans who were clearly military. Broad shoulders, confident grins, and that particular brand of loudness that comes with thinking you own every room you walk into. Navy SEALs, judging by the faded trident tattoos peeking out from under their t-shirt sleeves and the way they carried themselves like walking recruiting posters. The guy leading their little comedy show was Brant, mid-30s, sunburned, with eyes that had seen some serious action and found half of it hilarious. He nudged his buddy and nodded toward Ward. "Look at this guy. Did Disney World lose their mascot or what?" Another one snorted. "Maybe he's advertising for the next James Bond movie. You know, fancy tea service at cruising altitude." The laughter rippled just loud enough to be heard 3 rows back. Not quite offensive enough to call out, but definitely intended to sting. Ward didn't even blink, just kept walking with that same measured pace until he reached 12A window seat. He stored his bare-skinned case like he was handling museum pieces, slid the garment bag on top, and sat down in one fluid motion. No fumbling with the overhead bin, no checking his phone, just sat. Adjusted his posture once and closed his eyes. Before the plane even finished taxiing, he was perfectly still. "Guy's already asleep." Brant's voice drifted back. "We haven't even hit altitude." "Probably worn out from all that saluting," came the response. But Ward didn't twitch, didn't flinch. His hands rested in his lap, fingers laced, breathing steady and even. To everyone watching, it looked like the deepest sleep imaginable. But here's what they didn't know about Corporal Thomas Ward. 12 years ago, he wasn't wearing a ceremonial uniform. He was crouched behind a half-destroyed mud wall in Helmand Province, blood soaking through a field bandage wrapped around his left hand. The sky was full of dust and gunship noise, and the Chinook they'd been riding in was twisted metal and dying engines. Then, Sergeant Ward pressed a headset to his ear, static crackling as he shouted over the chaos. Pilot's unconscious, co-pilot not breathing. Corporal Jackson was slumped next to him, eyes already going glassy. They'd been 8 men on that bird. Now they were down to 2 with pulses. Ward dropped his rifle, wiped grit from his eyes, and hauled himself into that cockpit. He'd never actually flown a Chinook before, not officially, but he'd sat behind enough pilots during medevac. Watched enough hands work the controls, learned to feel what machines were trying to tell you when words weren't enough. He didn't pray, didn't think about dying. He just grabbed the stick, kept the horizon where it belonged, and trusted 26 years of life to get him through the next 26 minutes. The burning helicopter limped across the wire at FOB Thorpe, with one side shredded and the other barely holding together. The black box never recorded what happened in that cockpit. Ward never filed a report. The medal they tried to give him sat unsigned in some Whitehall filing cabinet. When they asked him why he wouldn't talk to the press, why he wouldn't let them make him a hero, he just said, "Wasn't my job to crash pretty. Was my job to bring the others home." He never mentioned it again. When the hearing damage got worse and the shrapnel in his hand started locking up during combat drills, he requested ceremonial duty. Coldstream Guards, Buckingham Palace, where silence was respected and stillness had power. Now, sitting in 12A with his eyes closed, Ward looked like nothing more than an ornamental soldier catching up on sleep. But that left eye cracked open just slightly when the overhead light flickered once. Most people missed it. He tilted his head barely an inch, listening to something deeper than the engine drone. A faint irregularity in the right turbine. Not enough to panic about, not yet, but enough for someone who knew what to listen for. He exhaled slowly and closed his eye again. The uniform they were mocking covered skin marked with shrapnel scars, and tucked inside his bare skin case was a photo of 8 men from Helmand. Only one still breathing. Thomas Ward had earned every second of his silence. But silence didn't mean unprepared. The cabin lights had dimmed to that soft amber glow that makes everyone look like they're in a movie. Dinner service was winding down, trays clattering as flight attendants rolled carts back toward the galley. Most passengers were settling into that long-haul rhythm, pillows inflated, screens glowing, the gentle hum of people trying to sleep their way across the Atlantic. In row 12, Ward hadn't moved a muscle, still upright, still perfectly composed, still looking for all the world like he was dead to the world. But 3 rows forward, the volume was definitely not dropping with altitude. The Navy SEALs had discovered the in-flight whiskey, and with it, their inside voices had apparently gone overboard somewhere over Newfoundland. "I still can't believe they let the Queen's personal doorman fly coach with the rest of us," Brant was saying, swirling bourbon in his plastic cup like he was at some high-end bar instead of crammed into economy class. The laughter spread around his little circle. One of his buddies leaned into the aisle, craning his neck to get a look at Ward, still out cold. "That fancy uniform probably has built-in sleep mode." "Built-in pose mode, you mean?" Another one chimed in. "Standing around in London while tourists take selfies. Real demanding career path." "Bet he couldn't hold a rifle without those white gloves on," Brant added, tapping his fingers against his cup. "Those parade ground guys, they melt if it drizzles." More chuckling. Sharp enough now that the businessmen in 14D glanced over with obvious annoyance. A flight attendant paused near their row, her professional smile looking a little strained as she assessed the situation, then kept moving. Can you imagine that guy in actual combat? Someone stage whispered, "Excuse me, could you please cease fire? You're wrinkling the tunic." That got another round of laughs, but the edge was getting meaner. Not just guys blowing off steam anymore. This was the kind of casual cruelty that comes from assuming your experience is the only one that matters. Brant leaned back, fixing his gaze on the red uniform just visible a few rows behind. "I swear, if that guy gets up to stretch and pulls out a tea service, I'm writing a letter to the Queen myself." Nothing but silence from row 12. Ward didn't shift, didn't twitch, didn't give them the satisfaction of even acknowledging their existence from the outside. You'd think he was sleeping through the whole thing, but he was cataloging every word, reading the pattern of voices, the tone shifts, the building tension. Combat had taught him that arrogance often came right before chaos, and somewhere beneath the steady drone of the engines, there was a vibration tickling through the floor that didn't belong. Something subtle but wrong woke Ward. The first jolt hit like a kick from underneath the plane. Coffee rattled, a baby shrieked. Then came the pop, mechanical, unmistakable. Overhead bins snapped open, luggage shifted. Oxygen masks dropped in a tangle of yellow plastic. The lights flickered, then dimmed. A scream rose from the back. Flight attendants rushed the aisles, their voices pitched too high to calm anyone. The smell of burnt electronics spread, acrid and metallic. Up front, a woman burst into the aisle, hand on her chest. "He collapsed! The pilot!" Panic boiled over. People unbuckled seatbelts, shouting, fumbling for phones and masks. In row 12, Thomas Ward opened his eyes. Not startled, not afraid, just calm, deliberate. He removed his gloves one finger at a time, tucked them neatly away, and studied the chaos with a soldier's quiet focus. The intercom crackled uselessly. Brant was on his feet, pale. "What the hell is happening?" his teammate muttered. "That wasn't turbulence." Something blew. The cockpit door burst open. Captain Kane staggered into the aisle, gray-faced and drenched in sweat. His voice cut through the panic. "I need a pilot, now!" 200 passengers froze. Masks swayed. No one moved. Brant blurted, "Johnson, you flew in Iraq, right? Helicopters, not jets." Kane's voice was cracking with urgency. "Co-pilot's unconscious. System's failing. I don't have time to teach anyone. If someone doesn't help me in the next 60 seconds... He didn't finish. That's when Ward stood, smooth, measured, as though stepping onto parade ground. He straightened his scarlet tunic, stepped into the aisle, and walked forward. Brant actually laughed. "You have got to be kidding me." Ward reached Kane, met his eyes. "I can fly." Kane studied him, the calm in his face, the steadiness in his voice. "Commercial aircraft?" "Fixed wing and rotary. Combat conditions. I can get us down." Brant blocked the aisle. "You're really going to let him fly this thing? He's ceremonial." Kane didn't waver. He's the only one who stood up. The engines groaned. The smell of burning metal thickened. Passengers were watching, desperate, searching for hope. And all eyes turned to the man in the red coat who walked toward the cockpit as though this moment had always been waiting for him. These guys are for show. They didn't do anything. Ward didn't argue, just looked at Brant with a calm that came from having nothing left to prove. "I don't need your approval," he said quietly. "Just a clear path." Kane stepped between them. "Unless one of you is rated for emergency procedures on a twin-engine airliner with partial system failure, sit down and let me work." The aisle cleared. Ward walked forward, Kane beside him. "What's your name?" Kane asked. "Corporal Thomas Ward, British Army, Coldstream Guards, former Tupara. You've done this before?" "Chinook helicopter, Helmand Province. Pilot died mid-flight. I brought her down in a sandstorm with half the tail section gone." Kane gave a soldier's nod. "That'll work." Inside the cockpit, chaos. Alarms screaming, smoke curling from a vent, lights flashing like a nightmare Christmas tree. Kane gripped the yoke. "Co-pilot's down. Port instruments are dead. Hydraulics sluggish. I can keep us level, but not land." Ward slid into the seat. Calm, professional. "Then we've got 40 minutes to work a miracle." He silenced false alarms, rebalanced fuel manually, and smoothed the aircraft's yaw. "Trust the engine, not the sensors." Kane stared. "Where'd you learn this?" "Afghanistan. Machines talk. You just have to listen." Ward called for Keflavik. Emergency services cleared them in. Kane almost laughed. "They just cleared a Royal Guard to land a commercial jet." Ward smiled faintly. "Wouldn't be the strangest thing I've done in uniform." The approach was brutal. Crosswinds, freezing rain, near-zero visibility. Ward's voice stayed level. "Gear down on my mark. Manual extension. Don't trust hydraulics." The plane hit the runway hard, skidding, sparks flying. For a moment, it felt like they'd flip end over end. But Ward's steady hands coaxed the crippled jet to a shuddering stop. Silence. Then the cabin erupted in sobs, applause, and laughter. Kane shook, staring at Ward. That was extraordinary flying. Ward straightened his tunic. That was just flying, sir. The extraordinary part was having passengers who trusted me to do it. When the cockpit door opened, faces turned. Relief, gratitude, disbelief. Applause swelled, raw and thunderous. People reached to touch his arm as he passed. Brant sat hunched in shame, but Ward didn't look at him. He just returned to his seat, calm as ever. A boy stopped him. "Are you a real hero?" Ward's expression softened. "No, son, just a soldier who knew how to fly." The boy beamed. "That's the coolest thing ever." Outside, emergency crews swarmed the runway. Inside, 200 souls knew they'd survived because of the man in the red uniform. Unnoticed when he boarded. Indispensable when it mattered most. Would you have trusted him? Could you have stayed calm with 200 lives depending on you? Share your thoughts in the comments, like, subscribe, and remember, the most dangerous person in the room is often the one nobody notices.